we're very blessed tonight to have Canon Reverend Dr. Nick Reed with us. Nick is going to be talking about the Living Well project, which some of you saw a little bit about last week. And this really is the shining example of whole person care for homeless people and vulnerably housed people. But of course, at Living Well, as you're going to hear from Nick, they have people who are just vulnerable people who perhaps need a little bit of extra help with their mental health, with perhaps managing their daily living. All of that will be explained. And this is the model that we really want to get across the whole of the patch in all of our Hope interactions, in all of our community hubs. For those of you that didn't see A Call to Arms, basically what we're trying to say is that as churches and as communities, we've been really good in past years at providing care for people that involves street-based things such as our soup runs, giving of blankets and sleeping bags. But also in our buildings, we've done soup kitchens and we do food, we do emergency food, we do clothes, and obviously we run our wonderful night shelters. A lot of that care is really care that happens in quite a short space of time in one part of the year. And it's also care that's about intervention and recovery. And what we want to do in our activism is to move ourselves into doing things radically differently. And that is by looking at prevention. Prevention involves giving more. It's giving more back to the one person so they can live in the community. And that involves befriending and tenancy sustainment. It involves employment support, perhaps some social enterprise. It involves getting them to participate in the community and getting the community to want to work and be with them as well. So this is whole person care, empowering those people so that they can take control of their lives and then they can move on from the accommodation that we are going to provide into permanent housing. And so I would like to introduce to you Canon Reverend Dr. Nick Reed. Nick runs the Living Well project and he's going to be talking to us tonight. If you have any questions for Nick, please do write them in the chat section. Nigel is going to be asking all of your questions later on. And hopefully we'll also have time then to just touch on next week. So over to you, Nick. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and really good to see you all, and thank you for attending. This is a subject very close to my heart. Now I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see if I can get that going. Okay, and away we go, hopefully. Well, okay, hold on. End that and go start at the beginning. Okay. Now, I hope you can all see that screen, Living Well, Bromley, Whole Person Care. Whole Person Care is something that's been very much on my heart for a good number of years. Just to explain that I'd spent 20 years in medical research, developing new drugs, trying to understand diseases better. And at the same time, I was a reader in the Church of England and also had an interest in counselling. When my time with medical research came to an end, I ended up working in a whole person healthcare clinic, the Mission practice in Bethnal Green, working with patients with chronic unresolved problems, and then at the same time running a community project in Spitalfields, the poorest ward in London. And again, this was a whole person model where we had people from all sorts of disciplines working together, working with some of the most damaged people that you can imagine. And then also working at Burswood at the same time as a counsellor and the outpatients there. And again, working with people from all sorts of backgrounds, presenting quite complex needs and applying a whole person model. And as I say, I've been a reader, and then non-stipendiary minister, and then ended up as a parish priest. So Living Well, as you were sort of introduced at the last webinar, supports vulnerable people, disadvantaged people with multiple issues in their lives. It can be social isolation, mental health issues, including addictions, people who find it difficult to understand and access services, who are unemployed or homeless or in crisis and maybe just need a bag of food. I just want to say something about the size of the problem. Now, the size of the problem, this was pre-COVID. The size of the problem in terms of poverty and homelessness, some facts in 2018, 22% of people in the UK lived below the poverty level. The UK has one of the biggest, highest rates of child poverty in Europe, and the poverty rate for disabled people is twice that for non-disabled people, and people receiving benefits are increasingly being forced to find work and penalised if they cannot get that work. And so it's really, really hard core for if you're disabled. And one of the worst aspects of being poor in a rich country is the feeling of being excluded and powerless. So in 2014, the level of poverty was 13.5 million people in the UK living in poverty. And of 66% of those were actually, one member of that family was actually in employment. This was a huge change in the demographics of the country. It hadn't been like this for decades, that actually you had so many people in employment and yet living in poverty, and that's been an increasing problem. Post-COVID is going to be far worse. Now, poverty is caused by a whole number of things. It can be lack of skills, ineffective benefit systems, high costs, including housing, family problems, people who have accidents and become disabled, low wages, insecure jobs, unemployment, and of course, you know, the zero-hour contracts has caused a lot of hardship in people's lives. But when you look at poverty, we can have this stereotyped idea of who some of the people who come to food banks, but increasing numbers of nurses, police officers in London have had to resort to food banks at one time or another because just of the sheer cost of living. And the effects of poverty are widespread, affecting people's health, sometimes causing them to enter into crime, creating various homelessness problems, teenage pregnancy, drug and alcohol problems, and in fact it self-perpetuates and creates more poverty. There can be lower educational achievement, relationship and family problems develop, and a whole load of biological effects that poverty can have on people's lives. If I look at my own setting in Bromley, there were 1,000 families in temporary accommodation. It's far more worse than that. 3,000 families on the waiting list for housing. It is enormous. Those are the official figures, I should say. It's going to be far worse than that. So, living well. Why was it called this? As I was saying at the seminar, a key thing is we want people to be able to live well, and it comes from this encounter that Jesus had with a Samaritan woman next to a well. And this ended up with mutual sharing and listening and healing and transformation taking place in that woman's life. She had come from a very broken background, had become separated from her community, and through conversation with Jesus, she found healing from the past, but also was reinstated within her family, within her community. And so that's why we call ourselves Living Well. So people can live well, but also it comes from that encounter that Jesus had with that Samaritan woman. Now, when we look at the beginning of Living Well, it was a small beginning, and it started with when I moved into the vicarage a good number of years ago now. People were immediately knocking on the door, saying they had no food, had no money for utilities, they were struggling with a health issue, they need prayer, whole range of issues. And so we were finding that we were starting to give out food at the door, and then the church started a little food cupboard for us, and then it started from that with the food distribution. And then one winter there was a very heavy snowfall and there were people sleeping rough, and we were so concerned about their health. We're thinking some of them may well die. We actually got them into the church, helped them thaw out, dry out, and then we gave them a hot meal. And that led to hot meals being served once a week on Fridays. So, from just feeding a handful of people a week, we now were pre-COVID, we were feeding 150 to 200 people a week through the food bank. And then on a Friday, for our Friday lunch, which is a big affair, for many, it was the only time when people would actually meet other people and sit down and be able to have a chat, and the only time many will have a hot meal in the week. And so the numbers range from 80 to 100 pre-COVID. So when we're looking at poverty and homelessness, the root causes and the effects of poverty are multiple and complex, and therefore require a multifaceted solution. Because when we look, poverty has an emotional, physical, spiritual effect, but there are all sorts of other factors, the environment, the home and society and education and so on, all involved, and all those issues need to be addressed in an integrated way. When I was working in Tower Hamlets, I was working in this building, this old hall. It's where Charles Dickens used to give his public readings, and it was a great learning place for me, because when I was working with the people who came to the project, some were homeless, there was emotional brokenness, there were relational issues, educational problems, many were dyslexic, couldn't read or write, couldn't add up, and there was issues of substance misuse and mental health and spiritual brokenness. Now, when I looked at these people, I realized in many respects these people are like prophetic images. These individuals tell us something about what's going on in our communities, but even more what's going on in our nation as a whole. Because when you start looking at this and say, well, 22% of people in our country are living in poverty, that is a real challenge to us, and we're a very wealthy country. And that's why, having thought about this sort of the multifaceted nature of poverty, this is where Jesus' manifesto is so important. And I read it at the last meeting, but just to remind ourselves, he was at the beginning of his ministry, he was handed the scroll of Isaiah, and which is Isaiah 61, and he read from that passage, saying, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom to the captives and release from the darkness for the prisoners." And here we see a multifaceted approach, a whole person approach. Jesus was concerned about people's physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being all in one go. And you can look at this passage in a whole variety of ways, and it also causes us to engage with issues of social justice and so on. And I get really excited as you read on in this passage, and they will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. And they are the people who receive the good news, who have their sight restored, who are lifted out of those places of depression and hopelessness, And what we are talking about, what we're seeking to engage with through Living Well, is a rebuilding work, not just of individuals, but of community, and also to challenge our society as a whole. And so then moving on, how we help people, we've got a whole variety of services now that we provide. We have a food bank 3 days a week, community meal once a week, clothes bank every other week. This was pre-COVID, obviously. Shower facilities, clothes bank and clothes washing and repairs, blend choir, art therapy, counselling, music group, music therapy, advocacy, numeracy, and the whole spiritual side of prayer and Christian meditation and Bible study. Alpha, we've seen many people moving into Alpha. We've got a community garden, we've got podiatry, a whole range of services that we provide. And it's seeking to meet the needs of the whole person in an integrated way. So when somebody comes along to Living Well, we will have somebody triaging and identify their key needs. And sometimes people just come along for the food bank initially, and we start to build up a profile from that. And when they're long-term, or when they say they're really struggling with particular aspects, we'll go deeper and do a deeper assessment of those of individual needs. And and then we've got, over the years, we've developed a strong volunteer base. As soon as we started the work, we found people naturally asking, well, can I help? And in some sort of way. So we ended up with 3 retired GPs, one of whom has particular experience in mental health, support within the community, have counsellors, art and music therapists, church members, including those from other churches wanting to get involved. People started to catch the vision, and it had a natural momentum. It was as if, you know, people were just being drawn like moths to a light, or, you know, being like a magnet, being drawn to this. And so the expertise started to build up. And then we also were developing working relationships with other agencies. Initially starting to see who we could refer people to, but more nowadays, people are being referred to us. So we've got good relationships with other churches. The police community support officers have played a major part. We often find the police coming to us with people who they've picked up on the street, and they know where we are, and they bring them along. Or if somebody goes missing, sometimes they will ask us, do you know where this person is? And so we've built up a really good relationship there. Bromley Drug and Alcohol Services are working with us now, and they've found that it's much better for their people to go to a local base like Holy Trinity rather than trying to make their way to Bromley. And they've found a greater success rate with people coming to the setting of Living Well than when they're going to their centre in Bromley. And it's not rocket science, because there's all the other support going on there, because we're talking about a caring community in which people can flourish. And it's well known that faith communities play a big part in people's mental health. People in faith communities are less likely to suffer from mental health problems. If they do, they show a faster recovery from mental health issues, and they're less likely to relapse. So community is a really big thing. And so Bromley Council, social workers, a whole range of people now referring to us. And particularly during lockdown, we've got far more involved with some GP practices and particularly social workers. So we've built up this partnership with other agents. And more and more the statutory services are under more and more pressure to support the people under their care, and they are looking for people like faith communities to provide the vital community support that only can be done at the grassroots level, and the church has a really important part to play in this. One of the things, I was talking to Ellie Reeves a few months back, and Ellie Reeve is our local MP, and she was saying that whilst the government scheme is good, it was not really effective as it could be, because it was a top-down process. What really is needed when working with people in poverty and homelessness, there needs to be a bottom-up process, because faith communities are in a privileged position in knowing their communities and knowing how best to meet them. And so we're also getting a lot of support from local companies, all the local stores and other companies are getting in touch and wanting to support what we're doing. Another aspect of our work last year was that we were supporting a night shelter locally, and whilst people came into the night shelter, we could then do the advocacy work in helping look at some of their debt issues, some of the benefit problems they have, and so we could support that. And we can see that the type of support we provide at Living Well would fit in really well with helping this housing initiative, helping people stay in the housing. Because as I was saying last week, whenever we had that meeting, it all merges in my head, but we often found that you can find people accommodation, but it's helping them stay in that accommodation. There needs to be that sustained support, because for many it's a bereavement process moving from the street into their own accommodation. You wouldn't think that, but the street is their community, and that it's like family to them. And so it's really important that there is this backup that the church can provide, a church community can provide. So what we have learnt so far is that it really isn't rocket science. It's really very straightforward, and it emphasizes the importance of community and the fact that social isolation is a major cause of mental health problems. It is the major cause of mental health problems in our country. We're described as one of the loneliest countries in Europe, and it causes a lot of mental health. Mother Teresa said this: we think sometimes that poverty is only being hungry, naked and homeless. The poverty of being unwanted, unloved and uncared for is the greatest poverty of all. So what we've shown is the importance of community, where people feel loved, accepted and valued. Listening, being aware of where people are, that's been really, really important. Listening to people's stories. Doing things with people rather than for people. We're not just about handing out things to folk. We're wanting to empower people, to enable people to stand on their own feet, and holding and supporting people in their healing. And the importance of prayer cannot be underestimated. So meeting people at their point of need. And if you want a theological idea of what we're doing, it's about restoring shalom, that reconciliation within oneself, of that harmony of mind, body and spirit. It's about reconciliation with others and reconciliation with God. Now, what I would say about the whole person approach is the importance of working as a team. It's not just enough to say, yeah, we're dealing with the debt, we're dealing with the food issue, we're dealing with providing certain housing issues. What's really, really important is that those working with an individual are working as a team and communicating about that individual. That's the effectiveness of whole person care. The other thing about whole person care is that we recognize that one of the key experts in this are the guests. The people who come to Living Well are called guests, and they are part of the team. And it's not about a group of people doing something to someone, it's about that person becoming a part of the team and empowering them in the process. So I'm just going to show you a video, and this is an interview with Anthony, who started off as one of our guests. I wonder if it's going to work. I'm Nick Reed, Vicar at Holy Trinity Beckenham, and for a number of years now we've been running Living Well Bromley, and this is to support people who are very much on the margins, struggling with deprivation, people with mental health issues, drug and alcohol problems, and also struggling with social isolation. And so they present with mental health issues as well. But our whole philosophy is whole person care, supporting people, mind, body, and spirit, and with the love of Christ very much at the centre of all that we do. And our hope and prayer is that people feel, at the very least, loved and accepted, and in the process, find healing and wholeness in their lives. With our food bank, since 2015, we've had 3,500 people registered with it. But it's not just about numbers, it's about people's lives being changed through listening ear.
Hello, I'm Christine Stone. I'm a volunteer and a trustee for Living Well. It started with 6 of us, three guests and 3 of us. And gradually it's grown and grown because there's so many problems that people are facing in the area. The addiction problems, Bromley Drug and Alcohol Service work here, and they're doing a brilliant job here. The debt problems, we work with Christians Against Poverty. We refer people on or to Step Change. We have 2 advocates now who will help people.
Well, I would say Living Well is like a hub for many people who are distressed going through. And, you know, because what I found being here is that many people have come in very distraught, you know, very distraught, and being greeted the way they are greeted by action petitioners and volunteers. It helps them get through that turbulent time they might be going through. And the hub part of it is that it gives hope.
Yeah.
Because many of the people that come here, I find that they feel, or maybe they are ostracized by the outside.
Yeah.
And when they come here, they feel welcomed. So that you can see that by the time at the door, you've got people who can't wait to get in.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just for the face of the food, but it's to see the faces, how you're doing, and it's how you're really doing.
Yeah, it's really about community.
Yeah, and the care, you know what I mean? Because I would say that, well, the love of Christ is shown by yourself and the volunteers. It's not just like word of mouth.
No.
You know, I mean, it's action too. And I mean, when someone's going through, that can be very meaningful.
Yeah.
To know that someone cares. So I think, having been a user and a volunteer, I see both sides.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, to balance it out, because sometimes I'm seeing people come through the door and I'm saying, but for the grace of God, that could have been me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I remember when I was at that state, where, you know what I mean, someone said, listen, don't worry, it'll be okay. Like, it made me remember that we're blessed to be blessings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's why to turn around and volunteer now is like, well, I'm blessing. You know, so between the clothes, the food, and advocacy, that can hold someone together as they go through that patch. I mean, hopefully it's a patch, not a lifestyle.
No, no.
So therefore, you know, you can go in that room right now and you see love.
Yeah.
You know, some of you will listen, boy, here, what I've, you know, I've got this, got a court case on Monday, but right now, you would know that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're in a place where the ambience is just joy, love.
Brilliant. Oh, Anthony, thank you very much for being so open
Not a problem. Any friend of Jesus is a friend of mine.
My name is Ruth Meekins. I really love working with the people in here, and because it is sewing, repairing their clothes really give me a license to talk to them, because the person who doesn't want to talk would talk with me because I'm fixing his clothes, and that's really a trust between us. And if they wanted, I would ask them. I will pray or prayer right here, or I will take their name and pray at home. And God willing, every Friday if I come, I will see the same people, and I fix anything, shoes. Somebody asked me shoes, but I said no thanks. But I did fix a lot of stuff, and more than that, being friends with them and listening to them and sharing with them. There is someone who loves them.
One of the things I find that being part of Living Well, I receive probably more than I give out. And in the process, one of the things I get an overwhelming sense of God's love and compassion for the people who come along. And they have so much to teach us about what's really important in life, about what it means to be truly human, and the importance of community and supporting one another. And I've learned so much from them, and we have lots of laughter, we shed tears together, but it's a real sense of being part of a work that is very much Christ-centered. Oops. Okay, one of the things I would say, I just noticed the time is whizzing past. We do need to be aware of the quick fix approach, and in this work we always need to be prepared for the long haul. And when we're looking at the healing process, it would be lovely if it was like a nice smooth curve, but very often it's just like this. You take several steps forward and it looks as if you're going backwards, and those times of relapse are really important in supporting people and helping them through those times when further pain and emotional brokenness emerges. And I'm not going to show these slides, but what I would say is you need to be prepared for the relapses and really be prepared to journey with people. And also there will be those times when people will feel suicidal, and you need to be able to journey with them and see them through those hard times. One of the big questions is, are we creating dependence? No, I don't believe we are, because of the statistics show that many of the people who come to the food bank come 2 or 3 or 5 times, and then they move on. And what we are really trying to develop is a shared responsibility rather than a dependence. And what about post-COVID? Well, in 2013, we were seeing something like 13.5 million people in poverty, and we were expecting a tidal wave coming on into this year. Now we're expecting a tsunami, and the needs are going to be enormous. But what I want to conclude with is just say, developing a whole person care model in your communities. Take small steps, open your churches, offer people a cup of tea, start listening to their stories. And it's just amazing what takes place just when you do that. I'm thinking of one person who came to the food bank with a bunch of flowers. We hadn't seen her for a month or so, and she'd come back and she said, "You made such a difference in my life." You said, "It wasn't just about the food you gave me, but it's the fact you stopped and listened to me." And also, as you move forward in developing a whole person model, identify potential partners. And what I would say is that we're all on a journey together. in this work, which is all part of God's kingdom work. And at Living Well, our heart is to share everything we've got. We've got procedures, we've got policies and everything. We would be really willing to support anybody who wants to develop a whole person approach. So together, everyone achieves much more. And that's what I want to really see develop in Rochester, in the diocese and further afield. Lots more living wells. You don't have to copy exactly what we're doing, but just follow the whole person model. Take a step of faith in that, and God will provide. We've just been amazed how he has provided. Sorry, I'll stop there, but God has provided in an amazing way.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nick. Now, while you've been speaking, a number of questions have come in. I'm going to hand over to Nigel in a moment for him to ask you those questions, Nick. You want to get yourself a drink? Oh, you've got one there, good. I must just say, I mean, we visit Living Well and people there are really being supported, and we just feel that this is a great way that we would help those people in our community who are going to be living in the houses that we're going to be getting. So Nigel, could you ask your questions, please?
Well, what I've done is trying to just take some of the questions that have come up through the chat and just kind of slightly develop them a little bit. Nick, you've talked about a huge tidal wave, which is kind of in the post-COVID-19 world.
Yeah.
How are you planning? Because a lot of this takes planning and logistics and all that sort of stuff. How are you planning to respond in the long term?
Okay. Well, the initial thing has been in building up our food bank program, and so we've enlarged our food bank facility. I think it's triple the size it was, with twice the size it was, with increased storage in a container, and we've got a fenced off area in the car park, and we've also been donated a mobile classroom which was doubling up for a store. But in the way ahead, during COVID, we've been very busy with through the food bank. We moved the food bank outside into the car park with a marquee, and also we've continued with our hot meals. Instead of coming into church, we give them a takeaway and also provide a telephone service. As we look further, I think there are whole areas that we need to expand, particularly in the advocacy area. So in the advocacy area, that's dealing with things like housing and benefits, and getting involved in appeals and PIP and so on. So we're building up that team, building up our IT for that. We've developed databases for knowing how many trays of food we've got. We've now got an app on our mobile phone, and so we can just look at our mobile phone and see exactly the volume of food that we got at any one time, and we can move food around, make appeals for food to come in, and if we've got too much of something, we'll go and support another food bank, and so on. So just gradually building up, certainly advocacy, food bank. Of course, a lot depends on how we're going to be allowed to operate in the future. We are doing food deliveries to people's homes. We've got counselling on via Zoom and telephone, so we've been building that up. Yeah, in all areas we see that expanding, but particularly in the area of the food, the advocacy, and helping look at the housing. So I'm really excited about the housing program.
And this question kind of extends that, I kind of guess. obviously you're providing a huge range of services. How's Living Well funded, and is it sustainable in the long term?
Good question. So, well, what's happened is that in 2018, our sort of income was 40,000. Then it was doubled to in 2019. 2020, it's tripled, and the income has. What we have found is there's enormous support out there for this type of work. People want to make a difference. So it is a step of faith, and we've always found that when we take that step of faith, God has provided, and but we've got the infrastructure there as well. And so we are looking at further fundraising. It's been great because Rebecca has moved from being an administrator to our project coordinator, and we're building up that infrastructure as well. So a combination of volunteers. I think, is it right to say, Rebecca, we've got about 80 volunteers? We found during COVID a lot of people had to self-isolate, and so we had to do a fast recruitment of others, and the support from the wider community has been enormous. There's such goodwill in that sort of sense. And we've looked at other various funding streams. So there is the normal grants that you get from very grant-making bodies, but we've tried to build up individual support, and other getting companies to support us and give regular amounts each month, and that's been really encouraging. That's building up as well. So not relying on just one funding stream is really important.
Okay. How many paid staff? And clearly you've got a team of around 80 volunteers. How are they trained? How are they supported? What about things like safeguarding? Okay.
Oh, okay. How long have you got? Okay, so paid staff. Okay, so Rebecca is now doing 30 hours a week, correct, Rebecca? And we've got music and art therapists who are part-time, music director, part-time. Have I forgotten anyone? As far as, oh yeah, advocacy, of course. We've got the advocacy team, which is 3 days a week, and within the advocacy team, in that video, it talked about 2 advocates. Now that's expanded, so we've got 1 paid advocate and then a team of others who support that work. And so we've got key team leaders running different areas, and some of those are paid and others aren't. So yeah, so that deals with the paid staff. Then the other thing is safeguarding is really important. We follow the guidelines of we have a safeguarding policy, and for those who are doing close work with individuals, they do have a DBS. Because we're working with vulnerable individuals, and so we cover that, and we will have a supervision for those involved with that work. Then obviously we follow GDPR, and we've got a database. Whenever we take in information, the guests, as it were, we ask their permission, can we store this data in this way? And everything that we store is stored in a secure way. What was the other bit of that?
I think you've basically kind of covered most of it.
Rebecca's got her hand up. Yeah, Rebecca. Oh,
Oh, here we go. Right, I'm mute. Yeah, can I just say a few words about the training side of things?
Oh yeah, training. Yes, they are.
Yeah, so when a volunteer comes to us, they normally will have an area that they particularly want to get involved in, whether it's food bank or advocacy. And so we would, pre-COVID, we would have taster sessions where volunteers could come along and try it out to start off with and see how they get on. If you're doing something like food bank, as Nick said, each area has a team leader, and it would be the team leader's responsibility to train that individual in the role that they are doing. If we're talking about special roles like the advocacy, then the volunteers come to us with certain skill sets. So if we identify someone who has in the past had a law background, then we would see whether they'd be interested to join the advocacy team, and then it would be the team leader there that would train them. Another example is the telephone support system that we've got. We introduced that because of COVID to try and reach out to people who are self-isolating and to avoid them feeling lonely, and to help with mental health. Well, with that group of volunteers, we had a training session from our counsellor, the Living Well counsellor, and on that team we've got an ex-GP, and we've also got a retired GP and a retired Samaritan volunteer. So it's important that we use the skill set of the volunteers that come to us. And then also we identify areas that need training. One example is our volunteers, some of them raised a concern that occasionally our guests, because of their mental health issues, can get aggravated, irritated, and sometimes a little bit aggressive, and the volunteers wanted support in how they can manage dealing with our guests in a more effective way. So we have got a mind doing a Zoom training session coming up soon on how to deal with conflict. So it's very important to us that we make sure that we listen to what the volunteers are saying, and if we identify a need, then we fill that need as well. And just very quickly, also Nick mentioned about, we have many of our ex-guests that are volunteers, and you don't have any better person to come and work and support our guests than those who've lived a life maybe on the street, living rough, who've been able through getting support, have found a way and found hope to change their lives, and they work with us as well. So in that way we're very fortunate.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. That's really, really good. Yeah. We've had training in areas of mental health and addictions and so on, and we bring in people who we partner with, and they've always been ready to help with the training.
Thank you for that. Living Well, it seems to be very much a hub-centered model, people coming to Holy Trinity and all of those things going on. The Hope into Action model is very much a home, a house, and their model is very much people kind of going and supporting them in their own home. How do you see the two marrying together?
Yeah, I see a good marriage there. We do sometimes go and help people in their home setting. We would just need to make sure we've got appropriate safeguarding in place to do that, and have appropriate matching of individuals for providing the support. Yeah. So I do see that being fairly straightforward, as long as you follow safeguarding procedures. Yeah.
And you've mentioned the word partnership quite a few times. How do you establish those partnerships, the key ones for the future, like health and local authorities, housing, and all of those kind of agencies that we need to be engaging with? How do you generate those partnerships and maintain them in the current climate?
Okay. I think a lot of them started coming to have lunch with us on a Friday. And you know, one of the consultants from the mental health team came along, and he looked at the people sitting down for lunch and says, "Oh, I recognize a lot of my patients here. And no, and as you get to know people, they begin to trust you, and they realize that we're not a wacky group of people, that we do know what we're talking about, and we do know our limitations. We do know when to ask for help, and you build up the respect. It's something you do need to work at, but it's not difficult. And so when we were sort of starting to talk about housing and homelessness in the area, we invited the local MP, police along, other potential partners come along, and we just looked at the problem together. How can we work on this problem together? As I say, a lot of the statutory bodies are just overloaded and will really be keen to get the support of faith communities. And yeah.
Caroline, we're heading towards 7 o'clock. Do you want to?
Well, I must say thank you very, very much indeed, Nick, for sharing that. Nick, would you mind sharing the slides from tonight, or are we allowed to share them?
Oh, yeah.
So I'll share everything that Nick's shown you with you after this Zoom. I'll probably get onto that tomorrow. There will be a copy of this Zoom available as well, so that if anybody's missed it, they can catch it up. I would just say that our final Zoom in this series is Monday night, the 13th. If I'll send the registration over for you. This is the final one. We've got John coming back from the government. We've got Ed Walker from Home to Action. And this is the one where we're going to be talking about the empowerment workers and the franchise. So we've sort of talked about whole person care today, and now we're going to be talking about the franchise. Just to encourage you before we go, from the Zoominar last week, we had 71 people positively respond who would really like to take this forward. And we've started the process of putting people into local groups who want to be part of this taking it forward. So we do have, we've already had a meeting with West Kent, and Vanessa, I'm not going to ask Vanessa to say anything now, but Vanessa, if you just wave. So Vanessa from West Kent is going to be heavily involved in that with the team. We've got one for, we've had an offer from an investor of a house in Sevenoaks. So if any of you are from the Sevenoaks area, what we need there is a team. We have had an offer of a house in Medway, and we have 5 other investors who are really excited and really want to get alongside us. So we're just trying to find out where the teams are. We've had one group of churches from Dover, which is very exciting. So as we put people together, if you are wanting to be further involved in this, do let me know, and I'll link you into a local group to kind of take this forward. And obviously the dream is that we are going to get houses, we're going to offer care, and do you know, we can do this. We've all felt very much that God is moving in this. It's the right time. It's the right time to radically change things. Who would have thought at the beginning of the year that our homeless people would be in hotels, and that we would be thinking like this? We would have gone into our usual swing of doing our winter night shelters, and it would have been very different. This is a golden opportunity, and I think we're ready to take it, and we have a lot of support. So I do encourage you to feel encouraged, to share this with friends at church, to share this with church leaders, to share this with supporters and charities and people who are working in the sector, because those are the people that will want to get together to make this happen. So thank you very, very much for coming. And Nigel, I wonder if you could just close by praying for us before we go.
Father, thank you for just the inspiration that's gone behind the well, the living well, and thank you for your provision over so many years, and your provision and encouragement for the years ahead. Father, we just commit ourselves, we commit all that is happening in our nation and in our communities, and we pray, Lord, that your bride, your church, will respond in the way that you have always called us to do, because it's in our DNA, and it's just what we do, Lord, because it's in your DNA. So we just pray for your blessing now tonight, and we just pray your blessing now when we meet next week, and as we develop this into the future. In your Son's precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.